Welcome to the India at Harvard podcast. Today we are joined by Zia Mody, India's leading corporate lawyer and founder and managing partner of AZB and Partners. Zia has been a key and influential figure in shaping the country's legal and business landscape. She was named by Fortune India as the #1 most powerful woman in business and has received numerous other awards on corporate excellence. Zia, thank you for joining our podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you.
My pleasure.
So, Zia, you trained at Harvard Law School and you went on to become one of India's leading corporate lawyers. Tell us about what drew you to law in the first place and why specifically corporate law.
So, it's a mixed bag, actually. My father was a lawyer, and I was fascinated by what he did in the sense that in those days, we didn't have mobiles. We had these walkie-talkies, and every time at dinner, when Dad was in town, we would hear one side of the conversation of my father shooting out instructions to his solicitor for the next day's hearing, what was missing, what judgments were required, where judgments went against us, where judgments went for us. All of it went over my head except for the energy and the excitement and the adrenaline that I could see coming out of him. So I think I was naturally drawn to law, and by nature, as my father said, argumentative. So that was a perfect combination. So I guess I always knew I wanted to be a lawyer. I finished my college in Bombay at Elphinstone. I then went on to get my basic law degree from Cambridge in England, and then I moved to Harvard for my LLM degree. I was the class of 79. It was the best year of education that I ever had because it was not so strenuous. The LLM was pretty easy. Made great friends. Friends with many of them till today from so many nationalities. I've been in touch with a couple of professors. We've all moved on so many years later, but gone back to campus, attended the women's celebration for Harvard once in a while, and continue to keep my connections with some of the professors that I have there. Why did I do corporate law? So after I finished Harvard, I went on to New York and got a job with the law firm Baker and McKenzie, which at that time was the largest law firm in the world at that time. And I did my New York bar. I remember my senior telling me we were just 40, 45 people in that office at that time. And I was the only foreigner. And I remember him telling me, Zia, nobody has failed the New York bar at the first attempt. And so no pressure. But did the bar, passed the first attempt, thank God, and did about four plus years of corporate law. Came back then to India to essentially get married to my husband. And then there was no corporate law in India at that time, Priyanka and Anirudh. There was no FDI. It was no foreigner was allowed. Coke had left. Pepsi had left. You couldn't get more than a certain percentage. So everything that I had learned there was really not applicable directly. And so for the first nearly 10 years of returning, I was a barrister, just like my father. And I went to court, real rookie, one of maybe 2 women in the courtroom. Clients never really took you seriously. What's this girl doing here? Why is a boy not arguing my brief? And so in the beginning, it was tough, both emotionally to think, oh God, am I ever going to make it here? And also had never studied a day of Indian law in my life. So really learning the law as we went along, not too difficult because English law and American law are still Commonwealth jurisprudence. But the present that my father gave me when I came back and started doing my job as a barrister was he gave me 41 bare acts tied up in a ribbon and said, just read these. So I had to read the Contract Act, the Sales of Goods Act, the Central Excise Act, just to get familiar, because he said each legislation has its own story. So just learn right from the beginning to the end. It's about 30 pages, 40 pages, just get a sense. So that's how I started my career in Bombay as a barrister. And then in Manmohan Singh's time, we were broke and India opened up and we had our FDI, foreign direct investment, come in from 1991. And the law changed. It used to be FERA, it became FEMA, and Indians, we were open for business as a country. And everyone had been missing out on India for decades. And so all the corporates from abroad wanted to come back in, explore the market, early days. And they would start asking me questions about India entry, IP protection, technology, litigation, etc., etc. And so I restarted, if you like, as a corporate lawyer. Tried to do both, tried to go to court in the day and do corporate work after court hours, but not possible, as Anirudh would know. Court is a jealous, consuming profession. And so I petered down on my court work and started doing more corporate law. And then you can't do it alone. So we started off as a small chamber, a boutique, 12 lawyers at that time. We're 700 plus now. So we've grown with India. Our story is really the growth of AZB is the growth of India. And so then from a motley band of learning, FEMA, learning everyday changes to FEMA, eating cold pizza at night, servicing foreign clients with the level of service they expected, bringing all the best practices to bear from Baker that I had learned. That's how I came back into corporate law.
No, fascinating. I think, Zia, that the brief trajectory you took us through was fascinating. And as you were talking about, your childhood and hearing the daily energy of briefs and case laws and all of that took me back to my own childhood. As I was mentioning, also grew up in a family of lawyers where the daily conversation was all about the next day's case
Exactly.
and things like that. And your bookshelves were littered not with interesting books from all over the world, but really just the Supreme Court.
Well, my father was quite a rounded character, and I remember when I was very young, my mother always teased him about it when he was alive. I think I was 6 or 7, and he gave me as a birthday present the books of Bernard Shaw. And my mother said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, it's for me. When she grows up, she'll read it." So he had
No,
loved
that's
that.
right. Yeah, yeah. No, so for me also, actually, my father gifted me so many books that he was like, eventually, when you grow up, you read them, read them. And I think from the time that I also remember, but I think you remember very vividly, the profession has clearly changed, right? I mean, you mentioned that the journey of AZB is the journey of India in many ways, mapping, to India's economic trajectory also. But before we get into that, right? Tell us a little bit about how the profession has also changed. You mentioned that when you started, of course, you were one of just 2 women, let's say a couple of women in the court. I think both from a litigation, courtroom standpoint, and also the corporate law firm standpoint, the landscape has, of course, changed dramatically. But tell us how you have seen that um, the profession change, the
Yeah.
nature of lawyers changed, and maybe the nature of the courtroom and the corporate landscape change.
So unfortunately, the litigation landscape has not changed too much for women, in the sense that if you look at maybe the top 20 senior counsel today, you will find maybe 1 or 2 at the most being women. It's unfortunate. I think it's just unfortunate. I think that it takes a lot more for women to persevere at the bar than in corporate law, simply because, when you're arguing a case, you have to win every battle. It's not you can lose in a chamber summons or a motion. You've got to just win everything. And so you have to be over prepared, absolutely on the ball. And if you have children, mothers-in-law, husbands, all that basically really eats into your briefing time. And so I think we still have a long way to go in terms of really having good women senior counsel. There have been some. Some have become judges, like Indu Malhotra, and they've been fantastic, but you can count them. In the corporate law world, it's different. The intake for most law firms today is almost 50% women, if not more, as first years. But again, it's a leaky pipeline. They fall away, they drift into personal life balance issues, they get married, they move cities, they move countries. But as AZB and being led by a woman, if you like, I try everything I can in the book to retain them. And so we would have, I think, around 35% plus of our women partners as lawyers, women partners, which is the key distinguishing factor. How many women stay on and stay the course to become partners? I think that is key. And I think that in the corporate world, you can, every day is not a signing and a closing. Every day is not a deadline for the next day. Yep. You're not before a judge before whom the client life depends. And so it's easier, I think, than it would be in court. But the landscape has changed where now you would see many more women in corporate law. Fantastic lawyers, at par with most of the men, better than many men. And I think that change is here to stay.
What about the softer pieces, Zia? So one of the mentors that my father also had, who I've had the opportunity to spend some time with, is Justice Venkat Chalaya. You might also know him, I'm sure. And so occasionally when I'm in Bangalore, I still go see him.
Nice.
And one of the things that he always mentions about how he has seen the profession, the judiciary, and the legal profession evolve, and I'll share it with you, and I want to get your thoughts, is he said that at some point back in his day, right, when he was still serving in the judiciary, uh, he thought that the judges and the lawyers were very well rounded. And his critique of today's time, let's say, is that the lawyers and the judiciary, the profession has become very, very narrow in its worldview. That's one view, but I wanted to ask you, what are the other softer changes like that you might have noticed in the profession, other than, of course, the gender piece that you mentioned and other things that you mentioned?
I think, in those days, the days of a Sorabji or a Nariman, you had lawyers who were more than just lawyers. They were Renaissance men. They had
That's what Justice Venkatachalaya would say.
and so were the judges. And I remember that when I was once a junior counsel to Ashok Desai, another great lawyer, when he saw the judge going against him, he just started telling a story, just a story. And it had no relevance to the case. It had nothing to do with the matter. But he got the judge relaxed and he got him off guard. And where the judge was going against him, he just calmed him down and took him to another place. So tactics, strategy, sophistication, and that generation of lawyers knew their law and citations by heart. There was no computer, there was no SCC reporter. It was all just memory and prodigious memory. They would know which judge had dissented, which judge had distinguished, and you just couldn't compete. I remember, I always tell this story to my juniors, that I was once going into a court case and I knew I had that judgment which would win me the case, but I just couldn't figure out the citation. And I knew I wouldn't have time to figure out the citation. So I called my dad and I said, I need this case, Dad. I need this case. It's this case, but where is it? What's the citation? So he first said, I'm glad to see I've become your secretary, but okay, I'll give you the citation. And he gave me the citation and he said, "What are you looking for?" So I gave him the proposition I was looking for. And you won't believe it. I went into the chambers and he had a chamber in Bombay, although by that time he had moved to Delhi decades ago. His library was still with us. And he gave me the citation. He gave me the paragraph number that I was looking for. And he said that when you open that paragraph, you will see a pencil dot 4 lines from the top. That's what you have to cite. Can you imagine? I phoned my mother that day and I said, "There's no question of competing with this man. Forget it." So everything was very different then. It was the personality of who you were. It was how you projected your credibility. It was able to concede a bad point rather than continuing to argue rubbish. You didn't insult the judge's intelligence by pushing beyond a point. You control your client better than you can today. Today, the client just wants everything and wants you to argue any rubbish. And most of the times, the poor counsel now to say, this is just not arguable. But I think the judges and the senior lawyers had a sense of camaraderie and respect. And, they could be against you, but it would be done in a very graceful way. You would push your point. As my father always used to say, if your best point is not going down with the judge, just drop it. Just go to the next one. Just find the one that he latches onto, and that becomes the best point, right? I think today the volume has increased so much. And therefore, again, the bandwidth available has not increased proportionately. So if you look at our Supreme Court lawyers, the best of the best, like you would have had earlier, maybe 15 tops, you have Salve, you have Rohatgi, you have Manu. But if you name more than 20, I would be surprised. And that's in a country like India, right? So therefore, the pressure on them to take on more work and to deliver it is much more reading, less renaissance, and more just getting, into the matter, making sure and working it up, and fantastic ability to pick up in nanoseconds because they're just trained to do that. And they know their judges. They know what appeals to which judge and which argument and which slant to take. So that's in court. I think in corporate law, every lawyer has become more sophisticated in the sense that today it's just not reading a section. It's understanding the nuance of the regulator. How would he think? Which hat are you wearing when you're advising the client? Are you wearing a technical hat or are you wearing a practical hat? That, okay, this section is fine, but the reality is, from all our experience, that the regulator is thinking differently, looking differently. So how do you calibrate what you do, how you give your advice as AZB, how the client is, the ecosystem is made acceptable to the client. So in corporate law, the risk assessment has become much more important and much more nuanced than it was 20, 25 years ago when I started.
Yeah, that's an amazing introduction and comparative to your father's time. Let's jump into the economy, right? India is poised to be the third to largest economy with the pace of its economic ambition today.
I think that it's not keeping up as much as it should, in the sense that we have so much of a backlog of cases. And, in a fast growing economy, the courts should be running along the economy. The problem is that the infrastructure is not enough. The amount of judges being appointed is not enough. The ability to digitize, to really use tools and applications could be better. Justice Chandrachud, when he was chief, did a lot to help that. Now you can join in and log live into video recordings of the court. That would have been considered sacrilege 20 years ago. It was always considered you can walk in, but the whole world can't see what's going on. But it also moderates and tempers the behavior and arguments of the counsel. They can't go on and on. They can't look stupid because, they look stupid. And again, in terms of transcription, earlier when we used to do trials, there used to be a stenographer who would take down in shorthand, read it back to the judge, give it to him for correction. Now it's much more simple. Today you see senior counsels coming into court with their iPad or their laptops, arguing from that. That's fine. Earlier you could only use paper and those pink and yellow flags to guide you with your notes. But now technology has changed such that the court process and arguments can be much more sophisticated. Who, unfortunately, not yet, there is no time limit, although I think it's being introduced. So you can go on and on, either because the judge hasn't got your point or because the client wants you to go on and on. But I think that the fact that we don't have time limits, the fact that we don't have a daily roster which doesn't get adjourned, the fact that judges are overburdened, frankly, and underpaid, frankly, and the executive has recognized that. But has not really been able to fix the problem. Today, what a Supreme Court judge earns in a month, senior counsel would earn in a day, if not
In
more.
an hour. In an hour.
And so, therefore, it's a sacrifice now to become a judge. And people do it, but it's not as much as you would have had before. And then you climb up from the district court. And therefore, what you learn from the district court, you have to get further learnings at the High Court, further learnings when you go as a Supreme Court judge. And therefore, the amount of available judges is less. The tribunals which have been set up are understaffed. I don't blame them at all. I mean, they have too much of a caseload to handle, whether you look at the National Company Law Tribunal or the Appellate Tribunal. So I think cases have to be heard and resolved faster. In India, the largest litigant is the government because the government officer doesn't want to give a favorable opinion by and large because who knows if people will cast aspersions on him. He may be the most honest officer, but who knows, right? So all of it ends up in courts, which is the backlog. Now, one of the suggestions when Bhanwati was the Attorney General was that if there's a Supreme Court judgment which decides 20,000 cases, okay, you can rely on that Supreme Court judgment and deal with those 20,000 cases. They don't have to come up the ladder to the court system. But somebody needs to give that officer protection. And that has to be what has yet to be formulated today. I think there are remedies, but if we are to be growing as an economy, our legal system must keep pace. And I think there's no denying that all of us want it. It's a question of how to achieve it.
Where do you think, one or two areas where you think there have been good strides and achievements?
Yeah, so as I said, I think during Chandrachud's tenure as a chief, he allowed a lot of digitization, a lot of systems to come into place in the courts where things were made simpler, less reliance on paperwork. That has certainly helped. But, if you have 20 courts, you have 20 courts. You need 40 courts. So what can a Chief Justice do about that? So I think the tribunalization of work which has happened is huge. You have the Income Tax Tribunal, you have the Customs and Excise Tribunal, you have the Company Law Tribunal. Every one of these is jammed because litigation has grown. Indians love litigation. And litigating in most states is not expensive. It's cheap. You only have to pay for your lawyer. You don't have to pay large court fees in many jurisdictions, in many states. In some where you do, there's less litigation because you don't want to pay 1 crore and file a case for 30 crores when you know you probably won't even get 2 crores. So that brings an internal discipline. But in Bombay, I think the maximum court fees is, I think, 3 lakhs or 5 lakhs. So people pay that and just go for it. And then the appellate system, even if you win in the first round, everyone knows there's a second round. So I often advise the clients when I still tinker in litigation that, it's a defendant's court. The defendant can just wait you out. So if you're a plaintiff and you get 50 cents on the dollar, take it. If you're a defendant and you're a cussed guy, just don't do anything.
And then there's, of course, the, vast system of the criminal justice reform. So my father, as I was mentioning, was in the Supreme Court. So a lot of the things that you're saying are resonating. And my mother works a lot with under trials across the country. So I want to get your sense. I know that's not your direct field of work, Zia.
No, but there's work and progress there.
System also, maybe you can share your thoughts on, because that's also a mess.
There's Anirudh, there's good progress there. The government has realized that you can't have statutes which send you to jail for everything. And so they have gone through very well and done what is called the decriminalization of various offenses. So that also encourages foreigners not to have the fear factor that, you can come in and if there's something, you can fix it, compound it, say sorry, move on. You don't have to have the theoretical possibility of being penalized in a bad way. That the government has been doing properly for the last 10 years, batch by batch by batch by batch. There's one set of decriminalization of offenses coming up recently again. Hopefully it'll go. The other thing that the government has done, which will help the economy and has helped the economy, is they have put into place the insolvency and bankruptcy code. Earlier, if a bank had to recover a case against you and had to file a suit and go to trial, 20 years. Okay. Now, under the code, that can get resolved one way or the other in less than 2 years. So if you are not paying the banks, the bank can take you to the insolvency court, the tribunal. The tribunal then admits the petition, and the owner, who thought he had 20 years, is thrown out of management, thrown out of directorship. Anirudh is asked to bid, Priyanka's asked to bid, Zia's asked to bid, and he can't bid because he's a bad boy. So he loses his company, and that's not a nice place to be in. So naturally now, lenders are getting the proper payback from borrowers, and life is moving on. And the non-performing assets have dropped significantly, which of course helps an economy. Because if the banks are healthy, the economy is better. And now the government has also opened up to Indian banks and foreign institutions, which they hadn't done before, which is that domestic banks can finally lend for acquisition financing. If you want India to grow, the promoters need capex. Capex is not always equity, and therefore you need debt. And if you can't get debt for acquisition, where do you turn to? You turn abroad for more expensive debt. How does that make sense? So now Indian banks, subject to certain conditions, are allowed to finance acquisitions, which I think will really spur the economy on. And we're very excited about it.
Yeah. On the transaction side, you mentioned, of course, 1991 moment, Manmohan saying, so much changed in the country and the economic liberalization began. Compared to then, now to now, I know you and your firm AZB have advised on some of India's most significant business transactions, legal transactions. More and more investors and companies have come in since then, especially in the last decade and a half. Tell us from your perspective, so many things have gotten resolved, right? You mentioned IBC, of course, there's the GST piece that's come in. So many reforms have come in. But what are global investors today, or even global corporations, still concerned about? What are sort of the things that are still remaining in the to-do list, where the concerns still arise about either entering India or staying in India or scaling up in India from your perspective? Are there sectors or kinds of laws that still are sort of, even in perception, barriers to global investors and global
I
corporations?
think there are much more positives in the minds of global investors than negatives. I think India is a country no foreign investor can ignore.
Ignoring,
Uh,
no. Correct.
and therefore, whether they want to come in by way of a joint venture or manufacture on their own or have a distribution agreement, and whether it's life sciences or healthcare, pharma, renewables, you name it, right? Everyone is looking to India. I think the pain points are still the judicial system. I think there is less of a fear than there was earlier about IP protection. I think that's much better now. I think that, what the foreign investor would be worried about is retroactive negative legislation. So you're going on one path thinking that, the road is X, and suddenly you're told, sorry, it's Y, and it's been Y for the last 20 years. You didn't figure it out, did you? And that again, I think the government after the Vodafone debacle has basically been calm about it and doesn't want. I mean, we want foreign investors to come to India, and we are a consumer market that is aspirational, growing, young, democracy. The mobile is, if it's one, you'll be surprised. Almost everyone has at least two. And the aspiration is the world is in your mobile today. And if you see the type of rupee and, pay and all the other pays, all the payment aggregators, I mean, the entrepreneurs that are coming and becoming unicorns here, the backing that they get from the foreign venture capital funds and the PEs is just amazing because they are okay to take a bet on India's young dreamers. And not everything will be a hit, but that's okay. The ecosystem has made its mark globally. The amount of unicorns we've had, the amount of success stories we've had with them making money for their global investors, the amount of standing that they have given us in the global stage. Who can ignore? Earlier, our claim to fame was our TCS, Infosys, etc., where we were the world's back office in the best way. But it's no longer just that. It's so much more. You have a manufacturing base that has workers. Our problem remains skilling of workers. We have many more people that can come into the workforce, including women. That itself will grow India's engine. But by and large, as a lawyer, when we see the kind of people and the clients who want to come to India, invest in India, make money from India, reinvest in India, it's a great story. I mean, of course, we have our downsides in this, that, and the other. But if you ask me, by and large, India is a very attractive destination. And as a lawyer and as a law firm, as intermediaries, we have to explain to them some of the risks. But the plus points normally far outweigh the risks. Now, if there's a particular industry like defense where you have to be extra cautious so you don't run afoul of anything, people are looking at nuclear, they're taking it cautiously because it's new. But, I mean, you look at wind, roads, energy, renewables, it's just rocking.
You must have also seen, Zia, the ambition of Indian entrepreneurs evolve greatly also, right? Both the tech entrepreneurs that you were referring to, and I come from the world of venture capital, so completely agree with the kind of scale of ambition in the tech world, but even broader corporate ambition of the Indian entrepreneur, the Indian corporate
Well,
corporation,
there
not
are
bringing
less
investment in, but
corporate
going out.
entrepreneurs. I mean, they become corporate after a while. Otherwise, there are the traditional corporates that you've seen. But our Indian corporates are happy to look abroad for technology and acquire and bring back what they couldn't invent here and arbitrage it in a way that helps us and helps them export, right? Our really bright Indians, all our IIMs and IITNs, have gone abroad, and you can see who's leading the global tech world, right? In
Yeah.
that sense. Some of them, not all of them, are happy to come back, uh, just to come back. India's home. And part of it could be aging parents, but the attraction of coming back and doing something for your country is very powerful, very powerful. And I think that, as other countries may become more difficult, if you like, or more uncertain, you will see a lot more of the talent come back home. And India is growing so quickly in the global capability centers.
Yes.
All these are centers which require great talent, great CEOs, great CFOs, great CTOs, and they're serving multinationals and Fortune 500s abroad. And everyone's thrilled with the GCCs. They're 2 or 3 a month being set up. That's the
Yeah.
pace.
They have been eager to ask you, with the advancement of AI now, India being such a global hub for the acceleration of AI, do you foresee any legal battles in the next 5 years around the advancement of AI in India?
I think there are some battles which have already started, not necessarily in India. One is, of course, copyright. Who owns the
Yeah.
copyright when AI throws a product through its LLMs? The next thing is, how much do people wrongly rely on AI that hallucinates at times? And how does it infect the product that you give, whether you're a law firm or anybody else? But the positives about AI is that the speed at which you can collect data, gather data, assimilate data, dissect data is, of course, much faster than you would have traditionally gone through, 40 hours of work. If you give the right prompts, if you're intelligent enough to know what you're asking for, you have the right product as an AI that is serving you. We use Harvey. Then you basically get an output which is good, not necessarily perfect. It's not a substitute ever for the human mind, but it does cut down a decent time of work. I mean, fear as a managing partner is always, if you get it wrong at the first level, who's going to correct it at the second level? And therefore, it's important not to think of it as saving time or being a substitute. It's just basically throwing data out at you and seeing if how you analyze that data is then really making it easier for you than to go to SCC or this one or that one or that one. Really, the truth of AI, the strength of AI lies in the way you are trained to use AI. AI is as good as the prompts you give them. You give them a stupid prompt, they'll give you a stupid answer. And if you don't understand what you're looking for clearly and in sufficient detail, then AI will not be a really useful tool. It'll be there, but it won't be useful.
Yeah.
With AI, there's a huge growing area around data centers and hubs developing, and there's so many layers of the stack of AI. I mean, how do we, in the legal profession in India, draw this balance between protecting consumers and enabling the innovation? Great our tech and regulation laws to support that growth.
Our Indian laws are still a work in progress. We have the data privacy part of it. We have the copyright part of it. We have the AI prompting wrong stuff as part of it. I think that, and then we have several regulators looking at AI. There's not one central. So the Reserve Bank will say what you can and cannot do with AI for banks. Other regulators will say you can't do this, you can't do that. Rightly so. I mean, we have some clients in the outside counsel guidelines which say you shall not use AI, right? Some say if you use AI, you will make sure you are telling us you use AI. Some say if you use AI, you will be responsible naturally for the product generated by AI. So every consumer or customer or client is alive to the fact that people are turning more and more to AI and making sure they protect themselves from wrong outcomes. And the users of AI, like us or any other intermediaries or anybody, have to be sure that what is produced from that AI system is not just AI.
Yeah, is your sense that, I mean, of course, what you mentioned now is in papers often that, the Supreme Court, other courts are admonishing applicants who've written their entire draft of their entire applications or appeals using AI, and it becomes very evident to any discerning judge. But that aside, how do you see the impact of AI on the structure of the legal profession in terms of jobs and all of that, right? So, two pieces on that I wanted you to touch on. One is that will law firms need as many, and I know that this is a concern for consulting firms, accounting firms, various professional services firms around the board, across the board. Do you see a change in the structure of your teams and all of that as a result of the use of AI? Tools like Harvey, as you mentioned, Bigor and others. Do you sense that your incoming classes might become smaller, or the middle part of your law firms will get affected more, or the top? So one, that. And second is a slightly more softer piece, which is, you mentioned early on in our conversation about your father telling you to read the Bear Acts and doing all that grunt work. Today, what
That's
AI
not
is
grunt
doing,
work. Reading the Bear Act, even if AI sends you the Bear Act, you have to read the damn thing, right?
exactly. So what I'm, I've been talking to IIT professors and I've been talking to McKinsey consultants. Everyone's saying that the younger batches of analysts or students are basically taking the shortcut with AI, right? So they're not necessarily wanting to read the entire Bear Acts. They're not wanting to do the basic presentation work or the reading, right? So is your sense that somewhere that intellectual piece that you've gone through as lawyers and in your younger days, if the younger crop doesn't go through that, that'll have some kind of impact in the long run?
It could. Because it depends if the younger mind is as curious as my 70-year-old mind. You see, I cannot sleep if I don't know what A is. I don't go to B, right?
Mm.
But today, Harvey will give you C.
Correct.
Now, if you don't know what A and B is, you'll start from C. And so I think that it's not malignant, but it is probably a thought process which says, I'm getting to C. Okay? A and B is baked in to C. And therefore, I think the problem is going to be if the younger crop of lawyers doesn't focus on the basics and the groundwork and takes the shortcuts. And the training has to be, don't take shortcuts. Because forget the damage you can cause to the firm, you cause damage to yourself.
And to the client.
Because when you are going elsewhere in the world, you don't know AB. You're just saying C as if C is A. But A and B were very critical to get to C. And so I think that really the trauma that is going to be facing all law firms is how do you ensure that the young associates are really good lawyers and not just AI lawyers. Lawyers who know how to use AI, but are lawyers first. And I think that, yes, in time, and it will vary for each firm, probably our intake may slow down a bit. Again, I am worried that if I have less humans, I will have more dependency on the shortcuts. So it's a balance that each firm will have to strike. But if you have really good lawyers who are passionate and curious, and they have the added enabler of AI, that is the super sauce.
Yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit, Zia, and go to what hopefully was a nostalgic time for you also, which was your time at Harvard, right? All of us here are Harvard alums. We look back at our time very, I think, fondly, and even in terms of the training that we were just discussing, I think gives, I think, a Harvard education, much like various other universities, gives you very rigorous training, right? Where you can't pull off a C without knowing the A and the B.
You can't hide.
And hide, right? But tell us about your time at Harvard, right? Both personally and as well as from a training and a law standpoint. What did it teach you about law? What did it teach you about being a professional? What did it teach you about being a person in a very global world? As you were mentioning, you had friends from across nationalities. But tell us about your time from.
And also how you feel it prepared you as a leader. I mean, leadership qualities.
So I think that, it was a short year, and LLM flies by.
For sure.
You could take courses that you liked. There were very few compulsory courses. So you had such a roster of interesting subjects to choose from, which you would never get elsewhere. I was with Professor Louis Sohn, who taught United Nations law and said he was in the bunker during Cuba. He gave us stories and war stories about his experiences, the quality of the professors. I remember we had Larry Tribe as our constitutional law professor, and he had written the book, and he thought nobody else should read anything but the book, but it was a great book. And you came read, you came prepared. The system, as you know, was read up those 400 pages before you come, and don't sit on the back and hide because you can get called out. And then the engagement, just because you were at the campus with your fellow students, was very, very collegial. You weren't trying to steal each other's notes. You were sharing each other's thoughts. You were trying to get the best from your fellow students. You were trying to give back the best so they didn't think you were stupid. And then you had a whole set of lives that you learnt about from different cultures, different countries, things that were so different from yours, but still so appealing. I had so many friends from my program at Harvard that have come to visit me in India. I've gone on holidays with them. I've gone to their places for holidays. So what you really make at Harvard is a sense of pride to belong to a university of that standing, a sense of professionalism because you have to be the best. You are expected to be the best. A sense of being able to share and give back once you go, and to stay in touch. Your professors who were always open to being hounded by me. And even after I left Harvard, I stayed in touch with many of them, and they were gracious enough to give their time. So I think the openness of the campus and the university, the quality of the deans, all, left an impression, especially when you're at that age, that, oh God, I'm so glad I went there. And God was kind, and I cannot not give back something, or I have to make sure that I carry that alum badge with pride.
Yeah, yeah. Zia, I know our conversation has been littered with you sharing a lot of, I think, nuggets of advice in any case. But given that a lot of our audience is, recent alums of Harvard, um, students at Harvard, and others, and of course, I'm sure people in the legal profession will also listen to this conversation with great interest. So we want to ask you pieces of advice that you'd have for both budding lawyers, right, in India today, young lawyers, students who are starting to be lawyers, policymakers, and business leaders. These three categories of people. What a piece of advice would you give to each of these three for how to navigate India's legal landscape as they proceed further in their professions?
For the young lawyers, the advice is quite basic and simple. Study hard, don't fool around, uh, become passionate about the subject, otherwise you won't last. You just won't last. And be driven in the right way. Be good ambitious, Make sure that you debate a proposition after doing the ABC, not the C. Stay the course. Don't give up too easily. Be prepared for hard work. That would be for the lawyers. For the corporate leaders, I would say they've come a long way. The journey has been good. The recognition of governance has been high. India's standards have just grown stricter and stricter, and no one wants to see their name on the front page for the wrong reasons. So the fear factor is good. I always say fear is good. Just keep fearing so you'll follow what you need to follow so you can sleep at night. I think for the entrepreneurs, you said the second category.
Well, actually, I think, do the entrepreneurs also, and then the policymakers.
The entrepreneurs, I would say that there's no more landscape as exciting. Maybe China for their entrepreneurs, but for India, people used to bet on you for an idea. Now maybe we need a little more than an idea, but people are still betting on you. So all you need is something which has a practical dream, not necessarily a business balance sheet. People are still looking at seed investments, etc. And for policymakers, I would say, we have a set of bureaucrats that are remarkable, actually. They are thoughtful, purposive. We basically tend to say, oh, this is very pro-government, etc. But if you put on the government's hat, right, the job they're doing is the job they should be doing. Sometimes I think there are knee-jerk reactions. Sometimes there are policies that are flipped over without reason, which doesn't give a sense of continuity. But if you ask me, my impression of my average Indian bureaucrat when I first started in India and now has completely morphed. And I basically have a deep sense of respect as to the hat that they are wearing and the different alleys they have to navigate to come to a position which is actually what they are paid to do good for the country. That's the advocacy. And therefore, when we as a law firm do some advocacy, I think we don't bother to do it unless we know that the government will not think we're smoking dope. We have to put on the government hat and see where the pain points are. And I always say, little steps at a time. It's the ant climbing the anthill. It's fine. You're not going to get big blockbuster reforms. Those days are over, right? What you're going to get is incremental progress, incremental reduction of pain points, incremental opening up of the market. And the government is doing it right. This government has not interfered by and large in business. It has allowed business to flourish. It wants more foreign direct investment. And how do you do that if you create an unholy environment? You can't. So I think the balance is how to do advocacy in a mature way. I think our bureaucrats today are more open to listening to you than ever before. Earlier, it was, private. What will they say? They will only talk private. Today, we used to think bureaucrat, he will only think government. I think that just changed in both our mindsets. The bureaucrat is saying, takleef kya hai? What is your problem? Come and explain to me. And we are saying, we will explain the problem. We expect a listening ear. Don't expect necessarily a yes or a no. But at least we know we are now being heard.
Zia, we would be remiss. Those are excellent points. Just last question. We would be remiss if we didn't ask you how women can navigate this profession. You spoke about almost 50% of seats being taken by women and some. Leave aside the personal, but how do they navigate just the profession itself?
For women, I think it's tough. It's tough because, as Indra Nui said, and I'll never forget, our career growth and our natural growth clashes. We're mothers and striving to be good lawyers at the same time, by and large. And so what we really, in India, what we are blessed with is an ecosystem, by and large, that comes to our rescue, much more than our Western system, which is harder, I feel. If you're lucky enough to have parents in the same city or in-laws in the same city, that's a great ecosystem to rely on. I always say that my success is due to my mother-in-law who lived with us at home till she died. And she looked after my children more than I did, probably. But it is, and also, we have an inbuilt expectation that the woman must do X or the woman must do Y. So I got rid of that long, long ago. I don't see the need to do X or Y if I don't have to do X or Y. So I always tell the young women that I meet that who asks you to get up at 6 o'clock to make a tiffin? That doesn't prove you love your husband. Just let somebody else make a tiffin or get some cut vegetables. Why do you have to cut your vegetables? Simple. Why do you have to basically show that you are doing everything to suffer lesser guilt? You're going to suffer that guilt any which way. So I am a clear advocate of ruthless delegation, outsourcing what you don't need to do, and making sure you have the one person that can make a difference, a supportive husband, a secure, supportive husband. So every day you do not go in for a fight. You go home to a home where you are being seen as a proud support, as a wife who is on her own. You're proud of her. And your children, do they live with the feeling of being shortchanged? I think they do. In time, do they think that they get proud of your mother? Inshallah. But, there is always a sacrifice for women in any profession. And the enemy is time. And very often, the people who suffer are the family because you're trying to make it out there in the profession so you don't fade away or you don't be seen as being irrelevant. Now, how will that change? I don't know if AI can help that one. But I think that, the prouder our men today get of their daughters, which is happening, many more men today are invested in their girl child than they were 40 years ago. They will see to it that they will push that girl child into a profession where she's secure and stable, and it's not just a marriage degree. They're proud of their daughters now than they were before.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much.
As someone with two daughters, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that one of the fondest
I have
moments my wife.
3.
Oh, you have three daughters. Amazing, amazing. I'd love three also. With the two I have, one of the proudest moments I think my wife and I had, they're young, was I'm forgetting which character we were talking about. I think a dinosaur. We were talking about a dinosaur, and I referred to the dinosaur as a he, just in telling a story about the dinosaur. And both my daughters corrected me and said, "But Papa, no, the dinosaur is not a he. What makes you think it's a he? It's a she." And in
Good
that
for you.
moment, I was very proud because I was like, one, you've corrected my inbuilt bias of calling
But we
the
have
dinosaur.
to, we have that even as women. So I'm a Baha'i by religion, and one of our 10 commandments, literally cast in our holy book, is that men and women are equal. And
Yeah.
so my mother was a Baha'i. My father was not, but that didn't matter. My mother controlled the 10 commandments. And my siblings, my brothers, were also all Baha'is. So they couldn't get away from the 10 commandment. They always used to tease me that our Prophet Baha'u'llah says you're equal. Nobody said girls are more equal. But I got center stage, and my mother saw to it that I got center stage. And I think it's not just, I think more and more of that is happening. I mean, like you, right? I think we're just prouder of our girl child than before, and therefore we will do more for the girl child than before. And
Yeah,
that's what
yeah.
matters.
No, I think on that optimistic note, I want to thank you for, I think, not just giving us, this whole multi-decadal picture of the profession that you've been such an integral leader in the legal profession in India and shaped it in so many ways. I think your dad would be very proud of you as a daughter as well, I'm sure. And but more importantly, giving us so many nuggets of, I think, wisdom, so many pearls of wisdom throughout our conversation over the last hour. So I want to thank you for that. Thank you for the, I think, sharing your insights into the profession, but I think more importantly, the life lessons that you've shared, both for lawyers, but also for parents and
Been a
husbands and
pleasure.
spouses. Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
Priyanka. Thank you,
Thank you
Anirudh.
so
It's
much.
been a lot of pleasure.
It's been a pleasure, and I think you're such a fantastic alum. Harvard's really proud of you. So thank you so much for being with us today.